Tama ba yung nababasa po namin na you have intelligence funds in the amount of 21 million?
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague,
That amount to 30% of that office's budget component, Mr. Speaker?
yes, Mr. Speaker, it is meant for intelligent fund, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, bakit may intelligence funds po ang MMDA? Are we engaged in intelligence and counterintelligence?
Mr.
Purposes.
Speaker, my dear colleague, ang Metro Manila Development po ay part ng Mmda na kung saan NT at NTL FCAC. Opo, bahagi po ang Metro Manila Development Authority. At ginagamit po ito para sa panguhuli ng mga colorum at yung mga tiwaling mga empleyado. Opo.
Mr. Speaker, so sa MMDA po, we have intelligence funds of 21 million being used on the staff that are, ano po, Mr. Speaker, may we ask, ano po yung qualification sa paghuhuli? May we have that on record?
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, MNAT is, it is an anti-terrorism, what was MNAT? MNAT? Metro Manila Network Against Terrorism. Opo, oo. Ito po ay part ng NTF-LCAC at approved ng Metro Manila Council. Yung constitution po ng MNAT, approved ng Metro Manila Council.
Mr. Speaker, that is surprising po, no? To have that kind of, that we have a budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that admission. That is something definitely that we have to consider in studying the budget. Akala ko po yung intelligence fees dito would refer to something. Pero intelligence funds po talaga po ito. How timely. So Mr. Speaker, we'll go back to that na lang po, no? In a later time. That's something I think that we really have to review.
Yes.
Mr.
Speaker, my dear colleague, kaklaruhin ko lang po, it is not from the GAA, it is a locally funded po, from the Metro Manila Council.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, babalikan ko po yung punto na yun, no, between LGU and GAA, as I mentioned earlier. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, doon na po tayo sa flood control, everyone's favorite topic. Mr. Speaker, may plano na po ba tayo sa Metro Manila? Is it Metro Manila Flood Control Plan or is it provided by the DPWH?
Sa ngayon po, ang meron po, alam ko yung 50 year. Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, meron po ang MMDA na plano at DPWH na plano for the flood control. At ito po yung flood-free Metro Manila by 2030.
Mr. Speaker, anong year po ito ginawa yung plano? Kasi naging hot topic yung flooding recently. And in fact, it was mentioned earlier na mga flood-prone areas binanggit. But personally, we could say a few days ago, sa EDSA nga lang, nagkabaha rin. So I wouldn't know what's flood-prone and what isn't anymore po. No? So Mr. Speaker, we just want to ask, anong taon po ginawa tong plano?
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, 2013 po, DPWH had that proposed. Yung bahagi po ito ng flood management program ng DPWH.
Mr. Speaker, so since 2013, 10 years na po tayo, how much percent po of that plan has been followed?
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, as I have said, as I have mentioned, nasa DPWH po ito, kaya po ang sa atin lang po ay minor lamang po. Yun po yung sinabi ko, binabanggit ko kanina, na ang major po, mostly ng mga project ay sa DPWH at minor po ay sa MMDA, only operations ng pumping stations.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to disagree po. Kasi yes, in your operations, kasama yung sa pumping, maintenance, whatnot, pero meron po kayong 1.3 billion locally funded. So whether or not that is the lion's share of flood control projects, may flood control po ang MMDA. And in fact, you are involved with the flood map, the flood plan. So ano na po ang nangyayari dito? Yan ang tanong po namin, Mr. Speaker.
Opo. Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, opo, tama po. Meron pong 1.035 na budget. Almost 1.5 from locally funded projects.
1.3 po, Mr. Speaker, di ba?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, it's 1.72. 1.72.
1.7.
Opo. Na locally funded po ito, pero ito po ay bahaginan ng iba't ibang distrito ng Metro Manila. So equal sharing po ito po yung 35, umaabot po sa 35,000 per district, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So yun nga po. So meron po tayong flood control sa MMDA, meron rin tayong flood plano for the flood, 2013 pa ginawa. So how much percent po of that has been followed? I assume every year when we budget the locally funded flood control projects, sumusunod tayo with a specific plan, hindi po ba?
Mr. Speaker, yes, my dear colleague. Yes, the majority, yung bulk po ng flood control projects ay talaga pong nasa DPWH.
Mr. Speaker, most respectfully, naintindihan po namin yun. My question is simple. How much percent of the plan has been completed? Whether or not MMDA o gumawa or DPWH. Let us not point fingers at other agencies, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, as of this time, nasa 60% na po ng completion per coordination po with DPWH.
Mr. Speaker, at the rate that we're going with 1.3 billion of local flood projects in the MMDA and way larger amount to the DPWH, kailan po kaya mako-complete itong plano? Kasi, Mr. Speaker, our concern is 2013 pa po ito ginagawa, pero by the time siguro na matapos to, may ibang flood-prone areas na. So parang catch-up lang po ito. The same exact issue that was brought up with the DPWH during the pre-budget deliberations.
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, according to DPWH, dun po sa kanila pong pinrograma na flood-free Metro Manila, matatapos po ito ng 2030, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague. So, inaasahan po natin na ito po ay completed by 2030. Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do hope na mangyayari po yan and then by 2030, wala na pong catch-up plan, no? It would not need a catch-up plan. So, Mr. Speaker, regarding po pa rin sa flood, tama po ba? We are allocating sa locally funded 260 million in dredging and 147 million in deepening. What is the difference between deepening and dredging, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, may I request for 1 minute suspension?
Session suspended.